Let me start. What? Why are you getting nervous? Why are you getting nervous? Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Everything's going to be fine. You guys know what this is? It's a watermelon. Very good. It's a very small watermelon. Yeah, I guess it's a mini watermelon. Anybody want to guess what else is unique about this watermelon? It's seedless. How'd you know that? Can you tell? Hold on, I'm going to check it. I'm going to make sure. Okay, I'll be careful. Something really interesting about seedless watermelons, aside from the fact that they are an abomination in nature. So what's fascinating, it does look good, doesn't it? I'm going to try a piece. What's fascinating about, I don't know, this fruit that I hold in my hand, man, is that someone genetically engineered this. Actually, they genetically engineered the seed that created this to not have seeds in it, right? I mean, that's the idea. I mean, does anybody know why that we would do that? Why someone would go to all that trouble? Anybody? Because people hate seeds, right? I mean, what makes watermelon not be the very best food in the world? The seeds. I mean, without seeds, it now goes right up there in the category of like crab legs and fondue. It's up there in the upper echelon of food without the seeds. But I mean, the seeds are the problem. It's such a good food, but you'll have to spit out the seeds. It's undignified. And it's hard to eat watermelon properly anywhere, actually, because of the seeds. And so we've gone out of our way, human ingenuity, we've gone out of our way to distort the natural order of the fruit so that we can create what we think is a better version. But what's really interesting about the seedless watermelon, I don't know if you can tell, maybe this one's a better example. Actually, a seedless watermelon has in it these dead little weird seeds. You see them? These little white anemic seeds. There are still seeds in here. They just can't seem to get them all out. But it appears to me, I mean, if you see that seed versus, say, a proper watermelon seed, I don't think that would actually bear any fruit. I don't think that would actually cause another watermelon to be born in the world. Sadly, I have to start this morning with this image because I think it's a summary, it's a metaphor, an analogy for the kinds of Christians our churches are producing. A kind of Christianity almost that we're actually working hard to produce seedless Christians. I mean, we're actually, and it's not that we can't make more of these, it just has to be the genetic engineer itself, the home base, the headquarters somewhere that has these special seeds. But those seeds can't produce other seeds. The line must die with each fruit. And so it's not that the church isn't making Christians. There are some Christians coming out of our expressions of church in the world. And by the way, I don't mean this as a mean-spirited thing. I simply mean it as a reality. That we are actually working hard to control the means of production of Christians in our world, at least in the Western world. It's like somehow we realized we could, and so we do. Somehow we realized that it's probably a little bit too out of control to just allow every single Christian to have those seeds of the gospel and seeds of transformation and seeds of the kingdom itself inside of them out there somewhere where we can't control it. And so better to engineer something, which actually we all like better because the thing that we're engineering is something that doesn't have those sort of pesky seeds that you have to spit out all the time. I mean, the truth is, not every single seed inside a watermelon is going to become another watermelon. Most of them won't. Most of them just get in the way. Most of them just get spit out. And if we think of it as our own faith, and actually the thing that we believe the most, which is that Jesus set his gaze toward Jerusalem on this day all those years ago and walked toward a cross so that there could be reconciliation between human beings and God. That truth, that reality, which is actually a gift that has been given by God to all of humanity, it is not ours to hoard. It is not ours to hide. But actually we think it's sort of obtuse. It sticks out at the wrong times and at the wrong angles with our colleagues and our friends and our family. And the truth is, wouldn't it be nice to be a fully functioning Christian and not have those seeds that have to always get spit out, that embarrass us, make us feel scorn? And yet still there are these little anemic seeds inside of us. We know the gospel. And then when that one moment comes where that colleague, you're not trying to share your faith because it's embarrassing, and you're a different kind of Christian that just loves Jesus but never tells anyone about that love. Wants to be a disciple but never takes on the mantle of the commission to make disciples of all nations. And even though that's the kind of Christian we've sort of been formed to be, genetically engineered, mutated to be, even though that is the thing that we are, still sometimes our seeking family and our seeking friends and our coworkers come to us and ask us a question about God, and all we have is one of these lame little seeds to offer them. And we find that we're just not up for the task, actually. Where did our seeds go? I know I'm not speaking of everyone in this room, but I am talking in a bigger, generalized sense. And it's something we have to own. It's like Isaiah's identificational repentance. And I can repent of it. I know it's true in me as well. That there's this kind of drift away from the thing that is maybe the most important thing to God. Where did our seeds go? I think it has to do, at least at first, in what we value and what we don't value. I mean, this story is a story about, it is a valuation. Why use money? Why go from talking about an animate object in a sheep, which has value in itself, but it can be a little bit confusing. It's almost like the analogy and the metaphor is so narrowed now to something that is inanimate. Money becomes the subject so that we know we're talking about value. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about whether or not, when we look at that inanimate thing, because it's a thing, it's not a person, it's not an animal, it doesn't have any life in any sense, but it's just a question of what is it worth? That's all. What is it worth? And it raises the question, the very important question for us about the sacredness of others, the value that we place in other people. I mean, coins don't have feelings, right? Coins don't feel jealous, so we can't read that into the text. They can't help the woman seek for the other coin. They can't find their way back accidentally. Once you're in the couch forever. You're never coming out unless some human being goes and finds you and there goes into the deep, dark recesses and gnarliness of the couch to find that coin and get it out. The coin can't rejoice in the searching or the success. But if coins could feel, if they could weigh in on the whole searching enterprise, they might be tempted to oppose it, actually. Because if this is a matter of valuation, just stay with me for a minute, let's get economic for a second. If it is a matter of valuation, then here's the thing. 1 coin out of 10 has less value than 1 coin in 9. That actually by losing one, the value of the other 9 goes up. And so if you actually care about your relative value, you actually want some coins to get lost around here. And it might even help you a little bit to feel more valuable if somehow there were fewer of us. Sometimes it can be strange to understand why the church, why the people of God would be so insular, why we would be so inbred even. Why? Because the mechanics of valuation, that is saying, what if we actually start thinking of our value in reference to each other? I mean, we knew people, because I've been a part of a number of churches and church plants, I've seen what happens when there's people that want to be a part of something small because they feel like they're a part, they're key, they're core, they're in the center of it. And then when it gets big, they sort of get annoyed with it. And part of it is because, well, maybe they're just not as important anymore. Or maybe they don't feel as central anymore. Some of that could be a real problem to deal with, but some of it could just be the sense of specialness and entitlement that we swim in our culture. It occurs to me that entitlement is one of those words that gets thrown around for the millennial generation, which many of you are. And I'm sorry to say that it might be true. Who's laughing? Is that Kathleen laughing? It might be true, it might not be true, it might be true. Something that's said about not even just one generation, but I actually think this living generation, that is all of us hearing my voice right now, this applies to, that there's something in the air, something in the water. In fact, I think we are now in this moment experiencing the first full generation who has been told, growing up, that you are special. And that's important. In fact, I actually think probably the most remarkable cultural phenomenon of our time, which is probably slipping by and we're not even noticing because we're in the middle of it and you can't see it when you're in the middle of it, but actually what we will probably look back upon and say was the most remarkable cultural phenomenon of our time is the selfie. I mean, it's actually totally, utterly ridiculous. This is the first generation of people that everyone has a camera in their hand at all times. And the number one thing they want to take pictures of is ourselves. They're excited about it. I mean, it's hilarious. You can actually look at people's Instagram account, and in certain cases, it's just a portfolio of pictures of myself. And nobody thinks that's weird. Nobody's saying, what are you doing? I think you might have some sort of narcissistic problem or some ego complex. This can't be healthy to do this. By the way, selfies are like roaches. If you see one, that means there's 100 you didn't see. You know that, right? You don't just take one and put it out there. You take another one, looking for just the right light. Till that double chin is gone, or that funny little thing is gone, or whatever. I was at a conference not long ago, and I don't know if you know who a guy called Bill Hybels is, but he's a little older now, but he was led one of the vanguard of what would have been a movement toward big churches in America, a church called Willow Creek, which is just outside of Chicago. And he was at this conference speaking in a format I had never seen before by him, which I think is kind of rare. They had his whole family on stage. And they had his wife, and they actually had his two kids, and his wife and kids are typically sort of not in the public eye, not in the spotlight. And so it was really sort of an interesting moment. They were asking about church planting. They were asking about what it was like for them as a family, the sacrifices they made, and what it was like to be a family. And I was really drawn into this. I thought, this is really the inside look at something like this, really caught up. And he told a super tender story about his son who was there. They're grown, his children are both grown now, have their own families and so on, careers. He was talking about how important it was to I don't know, keep your family close to your heart and to make sure that they knew that they were important, because he's a sort of a famous guy, and whatever pitfalls that come with that, I'm sure, are difficult. And so he said that at night he would say to his son, his son was from the time he was very little, he would go into his room, sit with him, talk with him, pray with him, and he would always say this following thing to his son. He would say, "Son, if I were to line up all the little boys in the whole world, I would pick you to be my son." And I was just so moved by that. Maybe it's my own baggage, or maybe it's my own journey, something that I feel or felt in that moment, hearing it, as often we do in those sort of moments where something emotional just hits us and we don't know why. And I was choked up by that statement, as if maybe it's something I wanted to hear, needed to hear, even from God. I don't know. But it occurs to me that idea, that statement, now we have this new problem, because maybe my generation or a little bit older didn't hear that from our parents, didn't hear that from society even. But now we have a generation of people who have heard that, or some version of that story, if not from their parents, then from the world at large. You're special. You're actualized. You can be anything you want to be. It's in the air. And what does that do? What does it actually produce in a kid? Because I'm starting to see it in my own kids. As I say that to them, I'll tell them that they're special. And the truth is, telling a person that they're special has a dark side to it. Casts a shadow. Not just because it can make your kid proud, which I have that problem. My own kids, they think they're special. This is a problem. Junior, you're special. And then they walk around like they're special. And the problem is, now you're like, no, I take it back. You're not special. I'm going to spank you now. But Dad, you said I was special, and I believed it. And I still believe it. You can spank me, it doesn't matter. I know I'm special. My kids don't care. They're resistant to my discipline. And not just because of pride or even because of lack of work ethic, because that's another problem. When a person feels special, why should they have to work for it? I mean, when somebody is told you can do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be, go anywhere you want to go, and then you realize actually you can't be anything you want to be unless you work very, very hard at it. If you go, this sucks, who signed up for this? This is not what I wanted. I just thought I could be whatever I wanted to be. The key was wanting it, not working for it. But it's not even those two things that's the real problem. The real problem, I'm afraid, is that it creates this implied partner truth. To believe that I am special gives us this secondary truth that not every other person is. To say that if I lined up all the little boys in the whole world and I would pick you, is to say that the other little boys in the whole world are somehow less than you. And that's not what we mean, of course. That's not what we want to do, is to create some sort of secondary, second-class citizen in universe, in planet Earth. But that's exactly what we do. People who know themselves as special might be tempted to think that other people are less important or less valuable than they are. Further, we live in a culture that is competitive by nature, in which the success of the one is always seeming to mitigate our own success. I mean, if that guy gets the promotion, I didn't get the promotion. If I get the promotion, then that means he doesn't get the promotion. It's an either or. It's mutually exclusive. We have all these moments where we feel somehow like we are threatened by each other and by each other's success, that we both can't celebrate. And it's difficult for us to really enter into the lives, both the pain and the joys of other people. Number one, because we're so narcissistic, because we've been told that actually the correct way to be in this world is focused on yourself. Caring primarily about yourself. Even now, I'm telling you, I feel this tremendous weight upon me as I say something that I know is pushing against a cultural force that is bigger than me. I mean, to be a fully actualized person is to be a winner. And to be a winner means, lest we forget, that for someone to win, someone else must lose. That whole paradigm doesn't exist in the New Testament. Winning is not a biblical paradigm. Because winning requires losers. It leaves a trail of losers. And what does that do in our heart towards others? Now, Eve loves animals. You guys know that. You've heard this. That's my 16-year-old. Are you 17? 17-year-old? 16? 17, 16. She's 16. She believes she's 17. That's how I think that too. So she loves animals and doesn't always love to ask permission to get animals. And so sometimes animals just appear in my house. For instance, as of yesterday, we now have a pygmy goat in our house. We have a pygmy goat, which she purchased without our permission by PayPal or something like that. And so there was a tiny little black pygmy goat, which is really cute, by the way, which is being bottle fed by her and was purchased without permission. She decided recently to get chickens. She just wanted to get some chickens. Now, this is all news to me, but apparently you can buy chickens through the mail. Did you know that? They will mail you live chickens. And so she found these chickens and decided to order a bunch of chickens, a lot of chickens. Now, apparently, when you ship livestock through the mail, sometimes they die. And because this is true, oh wow, if you're already sad, this story is going to get way worse. Brace yourself. So they know that some of the chickens will die, so what they do is they put extra chickens in. Just, shrinkage, loss, whatever. It's all built into the program. So I don't know how many she actually ordered, but a few did die on delivery, on arrival, but we ended up with 21 chickens. Unauthorized chickens. So she had them in a box in her room. We'll call it the farm. Now you need to also know that, you remember when we had ferrets? I don't know if you probably don't keep up with this, but once upon a time we had ferrets, then we didn't have ferrets. We have ferrets again. So now we have 2 ferrets again. And Luke was, letting the ferrets run around. I like the ferrets, by the way. They're really cool. Aside from smelling like a butt, they're really cool. They have cool personality, and they're just very musky. And you don't want to get too close to them, but they're fun. They're sort of neat little creatures. They hide everywhere. They steal things. They're really cool. So sometimes they come into the living room and the ferrets are just running around. But you have to keep the door closed to the upstairs. There's a door that goes to the hallway that goes to the upstairs. It has to be closed because we could lose them upstairs in the attic or wherever. They can get anywhere. So we could lose them. So you always have to keep the door closed. Well, for some reason, someone, and blame was flying everywhere, but someone left that door open. And the ferrets got upstairs, got into Eve's room, got into the box, and it was just a murder scene. They just started mass gore, murder, bloodshed, just murdering chickens, these 2 ferrets, just for fun. Just Dexter. They were just serial killing chickens. And it was horrible. I mean, it was a nightmare. So I guess they went up there, caught them in the act, this murderous act, the massacre. They caught it in the middle of the massacre. But I guess 3 or 4 or something like, maybe 4 chickens survived. And I found that totally fascinating, how 4 chickens would survive this enclosed box. They couldn't get out. The box was too high. I mean, it was just like, I don't know, the Fight Club. It was just stuck in there in the cage. They couldn't get out. It was just death and mayhem. But 4 escaped somehow. 4 got out. And so I asked Eve, how did they get out? How did those 4, because there were 4, like one of them was like hurt a little, but 4 survived. I said, how did they get out? This is what she told me. She said, Dad, they stepped on the bodies of the dead chickens. They stepped on even the ones that were dying and being murdered. They got on top of them to get out of the box. That's how they survived. And that, I'm afraid, is the way of the world. It is standard operating procedure for survival in life and business and competition in general. Unfortunately, there is an implicit belief that our success and our salvation may have to come at the expense of that other person. And even when we begin to follow Jesus and we think, oh, that certainly must end, no self-respecting Jesus follower would be like that. And I do think that something changes in us, and I don't think that we see others as adversaries as often. However, in my own opinion, I think that what happens is a sort of wave of indifference comes over us. We don't see them as our enemies, but we don't quite go all the way to God's heart for them, seeing them somehow as keys to our joy. We still struggle to fully value the other person. And so often when I talk about the needs of others, when I talk about the lostness of others, there's always this temptation that I sense from this generation to glaze over until the subject matter turns back to me. And guys, that scares me so bad. I do not want to be a part of a community that is self-centered. It dishonors Jesus. It cheapens us. It tells a lie about the church. If any man would come after me, Jesus said, he must deny himself. Take up his cross and follow me. There is no following him without self-denial. So what does that mean? Does that mean a deadening of our emotions? Does that mean a deadening of our concern? Self-denial, some sort of abdication of our body where we beat ourselves or harm ourselves? No, on the contrary. What a twisted, distorted view of self-denial. The purpose of self-denial is not to diminish you. It is to raise up the sacredness of others. It doesn't mean you're not special. It just means that person that you're sitting next to is special. And that, my friends, is a revolutionary idea in a world full of narcissists. That actually someone who is eternally beautiful to God, a treasure to them, works next to you in that cubicle. Is in the house across from yours. Can you believe it? Someone whom God treasures and longs for lives next door to you. But if we don't deny ourselves, if we cannot deny ourselves, our own selfish ambition, our own self-focus, we can't see it. And we certainly cannot feel it. And God forbid we see other people as a threat to us or somehow a barrier or a hindrance to our own success, our own goals. We cannot be Christian. You simply cannot be a follower of Jesus if you see other people as obstacles to your happiness or your fulfillment. I'm not saying that you're not special to God. Please don't hear me saying that. It's just that there comes a time in the life and the development and the maturation of a believer where you move beyond that question. Yes, the first foundation in a believer's life is that you are loved by God. The first revelation is that His love is for you, that He has made you sons and daughters, and He has given you an inheritance and deposited His Spirit inside of you. Yes, amen. And now you build upon that foundation something equally as profound, which is the love of neighbor, equal to the love of self. We must move on. It's part of what's missing. It's the problem of value. What do we value? See, I want to move away from evangelism as obligation. Like you're going to get your evangelical card taken away if you don't share the gospel once a year or something like that. So you rush out and hand someone a tract. So you did it, you're good, you get to keep your card. Moving away from obligation and more toward celebration. That somehow this other person is so valuable to God, to you, that they're worth it. The second is, this is a story about scarcity. It really is. It's a story about the scarcity of God and actually where we and what we find scarce in our own lives. Why choose a woman? That question is raised. Why choose a woman? Why does Jesus not choose a man or someone else? He chooses a woman for a reason. And certainly in Luke's gospel, women are very important. There's something that He's doing every time a woman is mentioned, and He's dealing with these dual kind of realities of women and their subjugation, women and their powerlessness, women and their poverty. He's always trying to deal with that thing. So for me, I think it's fair to say that this is probably a widow. And to say that she has these 10 silver coins is to say that is all of her wealth, all that she owns. It is the totality of her wealth. And if these are drachma, and if they are worth a day's wages, then I want you to consider that for a minute. What that means is that this woman, she is alone. It is a radical choice. She is alone. She is vulnerable. She is almost certainly poor. She has no prospects of finding either work or wealth. And all she has left is 10 days' wages. All she has left in this world is enough money to survive for 10 days. And now ask yourself, does that change the story? If all she has, with no prospects for the future, all she has is enough money to survive for 10 days, and she loses 10% of that money, how desperate does she become? And so losing the coin means so much, because it's a story about scarcity. And here's the thing that has to blow our minds. Jesus is applying the idea of scarcity to God. I mean, guys, can we just think about it for a second? What does God lack? It's a weird thing. Isn't it kind of blasphemous to propose that God is somehow deficient in some way? That He's somehow less than complete in some way. And yet that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. When you lose something that's valuable to you, maybe even something that your life depends on, you guys know what that feels like. When you lose that thing that your life depends on, you freak out. You get desperate. You do everything within your power to get that thing back. Can you see how radical it is to apply that idea, that mechanism, that emotion to God? So wait, God is like a widow? Are we comparing Him to someone who is in need? God is desperate? God is frantic? God is vulnerable? It's extraordinary. This whole chapter is extraordinary. I mean, surely God does not need anything in the same way that we need things. I mean, there's nothing missing from God Himself. See, our problem is that when we feel a need, we try to fill something that's some hole, some emptiness inside of us. That isn't true of God, can't be true of God. He is perfect and whole, complete and of Himself. And yet, Jesus is not afraid to use this analogy in reference to his Father's heart. It's not a mystery to me. If you understand the gospel, if you've read the rest of the New Testament, you know that some of this is tied up in what the gift of autonomy. Stay with me. I know I'm going a minute here without a story, so stay sharp. This is tied up in the gift of autonomy that God has given human beings. When he gave us his image, he made us free. And when he made us free, he gave us the terrible gift of self-determination. And that godlike quality means that God must suffer our choices. He must feel the loss of our rejection of his ways, his mind, and his heart. And we are all free to leave. And we all do. But God, in his perfect power, of course, has agreed to those terms. He set those terms. And of course, he could at any moment revoke that freedom. But he doesn't. And this is perhaps his most superhuman quality, that he does not take back the gift because we have used it so poorly, because we have rejected him with it. So what does he do instead? He does draw us. He does work to give us a way back to him. And when we surrender our own will, it does something unspeakable. It gives God something he did not have before. And that alone has to I could spend days thinking about that. He may not need it, but he wants it. And it causes him delight to have returned to him the will of a human being which he has given to them. That act of surrender is God's greatest and highest joy. If I'm honest, if you're honest, we experience scarcity in so many ways in our lives. But rarely are we actually moved by the scarcity of God instead. Sometimes we feel the lack of resources or lack of money, lack of recognition, lack of support. Sometimes we feel a lack of opportunity or education or rest. But in our lives, how many times have we really felt the scarcity of God? The scarcity of the thing that God is missing, that he wants, that he yearns for, that he is frantic over. The truth is, guys, we go searching for things we find valuable, and we ignore the things that we don't. How valuable are non-believers to you? To me? I don't know if you've ever been lost personally. I think probably the most scary memory I have of being lost was when I was very little. Like very, very little, probably 4 or 5 years old. I remember being lost in JCPenney or something like that and just getting totally lost, and these cosmetic ladies found me. And they set me on the counter, and I was just totally afraid until my mom could find me. For this reason, my mom would use a leash with me from then on, so wherever we went in public, I had a leash on me, which of course, for a long, long time, I thought was horrible and inhumane, and why would a person put a person on a leash? That's just not right. What do I look like? Until I had kids of my own and started losing them. Big story, 2 times when I really lost a kid. First, I lost JL, my oldest. I lost her in a sports authority. She was maybe, 6, something like that. Noah was maybe 4 or 5. And I think we were both together, and we were looking at shoes, and I turn around, she's gone. And Noah's just standing there. Where's your sister? I don't know. Not my problem. So if you've ever had this happen, you get a little scared immediately. Like there's a part of you that's like, burp, your heart drops in your stomach. And you're like, this isn't good. But you try to rationalize. You try to tell yourself it's going to be okay. Don't panic. And that's fine for like a minute. Like you can do that for as long as it takes you to look down one aisle and the next aisle and around the back, and then you're sort of out of immediate options and you start to panic. But still, there's this thing of like, I don't know, pride or self-consciousness or something. You just don't want to go, JL! Screaming the whole store because then you're like the guy who's lost his kid, obviously, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to go tell someone else, I've lost my child. Could you help me? Yes, I am the worst parent. When they look at you with judgment and scorn, you have to say, yes, I accept that. I am terrible. So it escalates. Emotionally, it escalates. You go through this weird cycle of escalation, fear. And so we start looking for her, can't find her. Come on, Noah, help me. So we look, we can't find her anywhere. She's not in any aisle. She's not anywhere. And I start thinking, could she have left? Could she have left the store? It's a big store. Where is she? So we start freaking out. Now it's probably been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'm starting to really panic. So I start getting the staff involved, the Sports Authority employees start all of a sudden now work for me. You know what I'm saying? You work for me. Forget what you were doing. No, you over there, stocking. Stop it. Come here. You're going to look over in Sector A. You know, you're going to be over here. And you go guard the door. It was funny because, I have what Clifton Strength Finders calls command. So there's these moments where I could just take charge of a situation. This is one of those times. I was like, you go to the door. I was like, well, let me talk to the manager. I'm like, you're not talking to your manager. You go in the door. This is your manager right now. Your manager. You see me? Look into my eyes, young man. You guard the door. We're going to look everywhere else. So we start deploying Sports Authority people, and we can't find her anywhere. I mean, she's not there. She's not in this store. I mean, it's just, and then, I don't know, maybe it's wrong, but then I start imagining Monica. I start imagining going back to Monica with the news that I brought one back. That's pretty good. Noah! Da-da-da! It's not a pretty sight, not something I want to happen, and then I start seeing headlines in my head. Local ministry leader loses child, and we found her, she was hiding, for those of you that are wondering where to look in these situations, she was hiding in one of the clothes racks, where the clothes go all the way around. She was in the clothes rack. What a lovely place to just play dolls or imaginary friend or something for an hour while everyone else dies of anxiety. Also lost Eve, so I've lost both my girls. I lost Eve. Some of you have heard this story, but I lost Eve at the car wash near my house. There's a car wash on Nebraska. It's one of those spray car washes where you put $1.50 or something in quarters into the car wash, and you have 3 minutes to wash your car with the little spray wand. Do you know what I'm talking about? And you only have 3 minutes, so you can't screw around. And you can't be bothered with parenting. You have 3 minutes. So I had Noah and JL with me. No, I had Noah and Eve with me in the car, and so they were there. And maybe Noah is the common denominator here. Now that I think about it, maybe he's telling his sisters, run. Just to see what happens next or something. So they get out. Do you want to stay in the car or do you want to get out of the car? Daddy's got to wash the car. Do you want to stay in the car or get out of the car? We want to get out of the car. So they get out of the car. I said, just wait right there. Daddy's got to focus. He has a way. I have to get through all the dials, the foam brush, the soap, the rinse, the light rinse, the spot-free rinse, the wax. I have to get through all the dial somehow in 3 minutes. Daddy's not messing around. Stay still. I'm going to go. Get to work. And I did. And somehow I got my car washed in 3 minutes for $1.50 or whatever it was. And so I said, okay, kids, let's go. And so we hop in the car, pop up. Doors closed, we take off. You have so little faith in me. So we're driving down the road, we're almost home. I look in the rearview mirror, Noah's good, he's clicked in. I'm good. And I don't see Eve in the car. So I slam the brakes, I turn around, where is your sister? I don't know. And then he goes, I think you left her. So I peel out, go back to the scene of the crime, and I look around. She's not there immediately. Now, if you guys know my neighborhood, it's not the safest neighborhood in Tampa to drop a 4-year-old or whatever she was at the time. I look around, I look down all the way at the end along this fence. I see her, and she's surrounded. I guess she's gone over to a group of boys who were sitting on their bikes, and she's there, and I see at a distance, I see her sobbing, her shoulders going up and down, sobbing. I mean, I don't know what's worse, the feeling that you've lost your kid or the feeling that they must have to feel abandoned, alone. 100 yards from our house, and she was utterly lost. Of course, I ran to her and I collected her in my arms and I said, Daddy's so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You left me, Daddy, you left me. I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. I try to imagine, and I've joked about this before, going home to Monica with just Noah or the other kids. At the time we have 5. And maybe I say something that Christians say, like, honey, we're not into numbers around here. We don't worry about numbers. The church isn't about numbers. Besides, 4 out of 5, that's awesome. Think of the retention rate. No other church or ministry has an 80% retention rate. That's incredible. Be happy with these 4. Do you think that my wife is going to be like, you're right. 4 out of 5 is fine. You don't need to bring all our kids home. Can you imagine that? Isn't that what we say about our neighbors? Isn't that what we've contrived, what we've conspired in our hearts to tell each other? That God doesn't really care about every single person? That every single child left alone on the street corner somehow doesn't matter to him? That it's somehow okay to pass them by? Now, I understand that if you go back to the child and you say, come home, Daddy wants you to come home, and the child says, as they are full-grown adults, say, I don't want to go home, that's their choice. I understand that, and that's a different kind of pain and a different kind of struggle. But what about the one that was never told home is 100 yards away? Who will take the responsibility for that person? Who will stand before God, whose eyes and heart burns with a fire that can never be quenched for every person he has ever made with his own hands? Who will look into those eyes and say to him, 4 out of 5 isn't bad? This is what it means to see just how sacred every single person is to consider them a child of God. This is what the next story will reveal to us. And before I tell that story to our non-believing friends and family who will be here next weekend on Easter morning, before I tell it to them, we must also press into that story that there are lost, wayward sons and daughters. And yes, they made the choice to walk away. They made the choice to turn their backs on God. But our Father waits in longing for them to return. And there is a second son in the story. There is a second son who lives in the estate of God, who lives in the presence and the joy of God, who lives in the constant daily celebration of relationship with the Father. And it is that son who bears the responsibility of his father's heart to go out and find his lost brother. The problem with the prodigal son's story is not that the prodigal comes home. That is actually a word of encouragement for sinners, that Father waits for you at home to embrace you, to put his robe upon you, to give his signet ring back to you, to slaughter the fattened calf, and to celebrate because my son who was dead is now alive again. The problem with the prodigal son's story is the prodigal older son, that actually the most wayward son in the story is the son who says, always, I have been with you. And the father that says to him, all that I have has always been yours. And the problem in the story is that the second son never went to find his brother. That he was so focused on himself and the value of his own life, and even killing a small calf to celebrate with his friends. That's the problem. The problem with the older son is selfishness. And it's our problem. And it's not that we are somehow worms or failures. It is just that the little brother who is lost and left sitting there on the side of the road is so precious to our Father. And this is the revelation our hearts need more than anything else, is to see them, to lose, to forget ourselves as we look upon this eternal person who is far from God. And of course, it is what we value. It is what we find scarce. And finally, it is what we celebrate. I'm not good at celebrating. It's not my thing. I think something's probably wrong with me, probably something broken in my soul or something. But I think celebration is good. Sometimes I plan it for other people. I think that it's important to celebrate. I love it when I see people celebrating most of the time. Probably, if I'm honest, it probably has something to do with my view of God, some sort of warped sense of my view of God, that God might look down at our pedestrian, ordinary celebrations, and he might say, smile a little and say, well, enjoy yourselves, but he remains aloof somehow from that. So I think sometimes maybe I feel when people are dancing or celebrating or something, sometimes I feel like, man, there must be some problem out there that I need to solve right now, or how can we be so carefree or whimsical? I know it's wrong. I know it's broken in me. Maybe I'm not entirely wrong, though. Maybe sometimes God looks down at our silly celebrations of birthdays and President's Days and made-up holidays. And maybe he's not so moved by that. But this, of course, once and for all makes me wrong in the sense that God does celebrate, actually. But it is only when eternity is touched, when destinies are carved, when the free will of one of his image bearers bends back to him. Maybe he's not whimsical, but he's also not stoic. And this text reveals that when the lost are found, God rejoices. God celebrates. And I want you to think about God for a second. I want you to think about what it means to be perfect. I want you to think about what it means to be immense, to be powerful, to be magnificent, to be God in every sense of every virtue you have ever felt. If you've ever felt or seen compassion, imagine the perfection of compassion. If you've ever seen or experienced honesty, imagine the fullness of honesty. If you've ever seen justice or love or kindness or gentleness, you must imagine in the person of God, if those things come from him, then they are perfected, magnified in him. And if that is true, and if celebration is a virtue that God has called us to, it is because it is a part of who he is. And I want you to imagine how that kind of God, transcendent and immense, would celebrate. Do you think that he would do it in a self-conscious, sort of, chill, dignified way? Or could you imagine, as Zephaniah says, that he rejoices over us with singing? God bursts into song And he jumps and he dances and he moves. It is such a spectacle that heaven itself must watch in awe when God celebrates. It is in the presence of the angels, and it is God who does the celebrating. I can barely contain that thought within my head. It makes me think, is there a greater pursuit for a human being in this life than to make God sing and dance? Can you think of a better purpose for your life or my life or our microchurches than to make God, to do something? We want to talk about outcomes and metrics, and we do that all the time in our strategic planning and our thinking for our microchurches. You want to talk about a metric that matters? God doing like a jig because of your microchurch. Breakdancing. That's probably unlikely, but blowing up with joy and excitement. I'm convinced that when God does a thing, he does it to its fullest. And Jesus unveils the Father's heart and shows us something that we did not know before about him. That he loves this way. Jesus knew the inside secret of the tenderness of the Father toward the wayward. He knew it because he held it in his own heart. Let me invite up the musicians. I need to finish. And this is Palm Sunday, and on that day when he looked to Jerusalem and he said, I'm going to go into that place and I will walk towards certain death. And he did that, and he did it with joy in his heart. The writer of Hebrews said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. Because he held in his heart this truth that we are so disconnected from. He could see in his own heart, he could see in his own mind's eye, his Father rejoicing. For this act of sacrifice that he was about to commit. How does a person embrace a cross? How does a person motivate themselves to walk toward their own execution? How will we become living witnesses again? How will our communities be full of martyrs, witnesses? It will only be because we embrace the same motivation that Jesus embraced when he walked to Jerusalem. And that motivation was a love so deep and so profound. As he looked upon Jerusalem, the scriptures say that he wept as a mother weeps over her children. And he said, oh, Jerusalem, how I wish I could draw you to myself. It was love for them. And so he took the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And he was whipped, and mocked, and beaten, and abandoned, and pierced. And punctured, and finally hung for us. What love. What love. And that love, guys, is not just to set us free. It is not just to save us. It is for the whole world. It is also to redeem our selfishness, to redeem our self-centeredness. It is also to set our hearts correct and to look upon the face of others and to say, your life matters. You are special to God and to me. And you need to know that there was a place at his table. There was a room in his home for you. And to do everything we can to woo them home again. We're going to forgo communion again. This is really a strange thing for us. We believe that every time we gather, we want to come to the table to remember the body and blood of Jesus. But we are purposely taking this choice for 2 weeks in a row to give that up, to fasten that, and in its place to consider God's heart for the lost, for those who do not come to that table, who have not eaten from that life-giving meal. And I want to ask you, just to leave you a couple things. I actually want Jeremy to come up. We're going to give you another resource. I'm sorry I've gone long. We're going to give you another resource. I'm just going to say a quick prayer, but there's a couple things I want to ask from you. One, and this is something I'm asking from my own heart. I'm going to spend this week, at least partially, personally in prayer and fasting, that my own valuation of the people around me who are far from God would rise, that I would value them more. I need that to happen in my heart. And then that we would commit to actually searching for and talking to people in our lives that are not home yet. They're wayward brothers, sisters, far from God. We're going to give you some help on how to maybe engage that conversation and possibly even invite them to hear the gospel proclaimed here next week. And finally, I've asked those of us, I want 99 of us, because to me it's some sort of symbolic thing for the 99 of us, the 99 to actually take a day and just pray and fast for the one, to flip the world upside down. And so if you saw the article I put out, and I don't know if there's a website that we could say, if I don't know exactly what it is, just 99, tampaunderground.com/99, the number 99. If you go there, I want 99 of you to sign up to agree. Let's sign up, that's not the point. To say that you will fast on Good Friday. I want to take that day, the day of his suffering for the lost world, to feel his same heart, to pray that we would have it as well, and to pray for those who will be here on Sunday. Pray that we'll do the best we can to provide, to offer the truth of the gospel to those people. Will you do that? Will you consider? Will you pray with me? Will you fast? If you physically can, do without food for a 24-hour period. Will you consider? Will you be one of the 99 that symbolically stands in for the one, that petitions the Father for the one? And so, God, we pray that you would give us these divine conversations, that you would lead us first to your heart and second to those people whom you love. And Lord, help them to say yes to you. Holy Spirit, go before us into their lives so that they're hungry, ready, looking for you. In Jesus' name.